And good afternoon, everyone. It's 5 p.m. I'm Tina Brock, producing artistic director here at the Idiopathic Ridiculopathy Consortium, and we're so happy you've joined us for Into the Absurd, which is our weekly virtually existential conversation every Saturday at 5 p.m. On today's show, Priyanka Shetty. Priyanka is a director, she's an actor, she's a playwright, and I have so many questions for her about the wonderful work that she's done in and around the country, and we'll get to that in just a couple of minutes. For those of you who are joining us on Zoom, please put your questions in the chat box for us for Priyanka this afternoon in the next 50 minutes. And if you're coming in on Facebook Live, welcome, welcome. We'll be here every Saturday at 5 p.m. for the foreseeable future, having the conversations with the artists and the creators in this community, getting under the hood of the car of what makes creativity happen and the challenges that we face in very existentially difficult times. Today's show, Priyanka Shetty, she has a wonderful show that I encourage you all to check out, and we will put the link up in the chat box, called The Elephant in the Room, and it premiered back, well, I don't know if it premiered there, we'll talk more about that in a second, but she was at the Kennedy Center with this show, and we're going to talk a lot about that. But I think best is just to welcome Priyanka to the table and get those questions rolling. Come on in, Priyanka, if you can.
Hello.
Great. Oh, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Tina.
You have a wonderful story that is so beautifully told in The Elephant in the Room, and well, as I said, we'll put that up so people can can check out the whole show. But in order to set the stage for everybody to sort of understand what led to that show, I just want to go back to the time, your time in India, when you were a software engineer and living what sounded like by all means, a pretty good life. And I want to talk just to set the stage a little bit, the artistic endeavors that you were involved in at that time. I mean, had What's the Scene, your show, come on the scene at that point?
Well, it wasn't until, I guess, 2010 when both of them happened at the same time. Until then, I was sort of finding my creative outlet with my writing. So I always thought if I wasn't a software engineer, I'd probably be a writer, because I wrote a lot of short fiction, and we had this company-wide blog called Infi-Blog, so I used to post a lot of humorous articles. So that's how the humor was finding its creative outlet back then. And I read a lot of P.G. Wodehouse, so that was sort of influencing my writing at that point. So what was really going on at that point was a huge following I had on Infi blogs, and theater and music hadn't really happened to me until 2010. And What's a Scene is a music journalism company I started in 2010, mainly because I saw other independent artists only getting 2 or 3 lines of print fame. And they were so talented and they had so much to offer, but there wasn't really a platform that was covering them consistently. So that's how What's a Scene came about. And we had a team of people that would just go out to gigs and concerts and review the shows and review albums, and that sort of grew and became a big thing over the next year. And around the same time, it was really this novel called Chakir Bali by Rabindranath Tagore, who's a Nobel laureate in literature from India. And it was that novel that, I chanced upon it and I read that. And there was this one character that I really wanted to play. And this is one story that I really envisioned on stage. And I'd also lost a very close friend of mine around the same time. So, who I knew through blogging and all of that. And writing sort of took a back seat because somehow I linked the two together, and I was like, I don't think I want to write anymore right now. So, and he was into film and theater. So it was almost a way of honoring him. By starting a theater group. And the first show that we did was a tribute to him. So that's how the theater group that I started at the time, Untitled, came about. And the funny thing about it is that it was all software engineers. I cast a whole group of software engineers that were stuck in the wrong job, just like me. And we started rehearsing this play, and I adapted it from the novel to, let's say, a stage version. And we just started rehearsing without knowing where we were going to perform it or when we were going to perform it. And it was halfway through rehearsals that I approached the HR of Infosys, which is the company that I worked at. And I said, hey, so you do these employee engagement programs. So why not, instead of bringing a theater group from outside, have something that is performed by employees? And she was very skeptical initially, but she didn't want to say no. So she just said that, I'm just going to come check it out. When do you guys rehearse? I'm going to come watch it. And later on, I found out that she'd come there fully prepared to say no and say maybe next time. But she loved it. She was only going to watch 10 minutes of it, but she watched the whole 1.5-hour play. And she said, okay, we're going to do this. And they gave us a budget and we did it. And that is when things really started picking up for me. It's not something, like I said, I did it as a tribute to my friend who had lost. And I did not anticipate that it would ever become a career choice for me. But when we did perform that play, it was the auditorium we performed in, 2,500
2000,
people.
yeah.
Yeah, that was the audience we had. And I think more because they were seated on the aisles. On both floors, there was a balcony, and people watched the whole play. They missed their evening buses to go home, and they caught the very last bus that would take them home. And there was this whole buzz about the play after that in the bulletin boards in the company. And even after the play, the audience left talking about the characters instead of, oh, this person acted really well. That's when you've connected, because they're so invested in the story, and it's a beautiful story as well. And something really amazing happened after we performed is all the audience members sort of rushed onto the stage. It was crazy, to greet us, to talk to us, and tell us how much they loved our characters. And there was this one woman who I don't know who she was, and I'm so glad that she did this, but she walked up to me, she ran to me, she held my face in her hands, and she looked into my eyes and said, "You're going to go really far." And that's when, what does she mean? I'm going to go, does she see me in this, career? Does she think I'm going to pursue acting? And that's when the thought even occurred to me that this could be something that I get to do for the rest of my life. And I realized that this thrill that I get when I'm on stage and when I'm performing, nothing else comes close to it. It really is my calling. So yeah, everything else sort of followed after that, but long story.
No, it's a
Theater.
wonderful journey. So you took that success that you had at that. I love the idea of being in the auditorium at work, and there's all these people that you work with, or these. Did any of the other software engineers decide that they too wanted to make that shift, or?
They did. I recently heard another very talented friend of mine, his name is Akshay Datta, and after Chokher Bali, we got even more funding to do My Fair Lady. So we went all out and did a huge production of My Fair Lady, and he played Freddie Ansford Hill in that. And he's so talented, such a gifted actor and singer. And he recently got in touch with me, and he said, you know what, Priyanka, I'm going to do what you did. I'm going to do this full time. So there's another person who's taking the plunge, and I'm really excited for him.
You gave him a stage to do that. So here you are, and you're out there, and the company is doing well. And it looked from all the other research that that you were getting, you were everywhere. I mean, there was, the company was getting a lot of notices and whatnot. So when you went to, let's jump to the place where you went to tell your family or your mother that and this all comes out beautifully in your one woman show, but you go to tell her, hey, listen, I think this is what I want to do. Now, had she not known that this was another part of your life that was going on?
So that's the crazy part now when I look back, is that I was doing all of this, during lunch breaks, and after, our office hours, after 5 p.m., we'd get together and rehearse, and I just make up. I'm not very proud of it, but I had to do what I do at that point, is make up excuses that, I have to work late today, and I'd be there rehearsing, because I had mentioned it in passing once with my family members. I'd gone to watch a play, and I said, you know what, this is so great, I really want to be in a play someday. And that was not received well. So I knew that if I told them, they probably not sort of nip it in the bud. So I had these rehearsals, and I started this theater company without their knowledge. And we had even performed outside of, outside of the company. We had performed at other theaters. And so it was a little weird when, articles started appearing on newspapers.
That was my question.
Because it was a great story, right? A bunch of software engineers.
There's many angles to that story.
Right. So, and I didn't want them to find out that way. So I don't know, it was a combination of that, or, oh, I better tell them now because it's in the newspaper.
Yeah, when I get a Tony, it's funny.
So finally, and they didn't know about What's the Scene either.
They didn't know about What's the Scene either? Is it just sort of arts, all things art related, really weren't on the table in the family?
It's just that with What's the Scene, I used to go, and I gotten in trouble with this once, where I was in Hard Rock Cafe interviewing a band, and it got late, and I got home, and they're like, where were you? I came from a pretty strict family, so I knew there would be friction there. And that's the scene that you see in Elephant in the Room is one of those, big arguments that I got into. It sort of covers everything. And, even in the play, she's like, why do you have these pictures of all these bands and musicians? And that's why. So they didn't know about the theater. They didn't know about What's a Scene. And What's a Scene at that point too, we had a presence in 9 cities. We had over 130 people a part of the team. So there was this one day, and then maybe I sort of, when you overthink, you hide.
Oh yeah, I do.
That's what was happening. So ultimately, when I told my brother and my mom and dad that, listen, so I started something called What's the Scene, they were thrilled for me. So a part of me is like, oh, I wish I told them earlier. But for theater, there was a little bit of pushback. And it was around the time that we were touring with My Fair Lady. And I told them that, listen, so I showed them the article, and I said, this is what I've been doing, and it's been received really well. We're performing at this university. It would be really great if you guys could come watch. And they did come. They loved it. And I thought they'd say, you should pursue this. But I remember mom telling me, this is the last play that you're doing. And I get it where she was coming from, because in India, there can be, especially, with our parents' generation, there can be this idea of, oh, this is she's a showgirl, this is cabaret, or she's on stage. And so she was really worried about my future, and I get that. But that hit really hard, because at that point it was very clear to me that this is what I wanted to do. So ultimately, obviously, I had to stand my ground and say that, okay, do I want to do a 9-to-5 job as a software engineer for the rest of my life? No, I didn't want that for myself. So ultimately, yes, they did sort of agree to my auditioning for theater schools and doing my MFA, and they're very supportive now. But that's the backstory.
But did they, when you were considering applying to school, you knew for sure that you wanted to come to the United States to do that?
Yeah, because I don't know, it was just that. So I was honestly Googling like B schools that I could go to, because I knew that IT wasn't for me. And typically that's what everyone was doing at that point, was applying for MBAs. And so I was looking for that online, at my computer at work. And this friend of mine walks past, and she says, why don't you do a master's in theater? I didn't even know such a thing existed at that point. That's how much under the rock I was. I said, there's such a thing? And she said, yeah. So that's when I first Googled and found out that something called an MFA exists. And I remember it was University of Maryland's website that I landed on first. And oh, really? Yeah. Great. So they have a fully funded program, and all of these things listed. And I said, this is amazing. what do I need to do? Oh, monologue. Okay. So this whole world sort of opened up in front of me, and I didn't have anyone to guide me through that process because I literally did not know anyone who had done that, who had applied for an MFA or auditioned abroad. And it was hard, it was like I had to figure everything out, prepare for auditions and this and that. But that's how the whole concept of an MFA even sort of, came to me. Yeah.
And so you then, was it a difficult transition to say to your family, hey, listen, I'm going to America and this is what I'm going to do? Or had they pretty much accepted it by
I
that
think at
point?
that point they had, because, they were like, if she wants it so much. And by then we'd seen a bit of success in Bangalore too with My Fair Lady. And then I did Fiddler on the Roof. Back then I was more of a musical theater person. So after that, so we had toured a little bit around India with Fiddler on the Roof, and that was a different company that I was part of. So I think they just wanted me to be successful, and they realized that, you know what, there is something for her here. She's probably good at it, which is why, things are opening up. So it was just that confidence, I guess, that they needed. And after that, they've been very supportive since then.
So you got here to the United States. You were in Ohio for a while, is that it? And then you went to your graduate, for graduate studies, you ended up at UVA?
Yeah, so when I was preparing for my auditions, I was in Columbus, Ohio, and I did a bunch of theater there. And that's where I found my mentor, Joe Bishara, who sort of took me under his wing, and I started taking classes with him. And he said, okay, so we're going to put together a portfolio and we're going to prepare you really well. And we prepared for almost a year for my MFA auditions. And he trained me. I had 4 Shakespeare monologues, 4 contemporary monologues, and I had a whole bunch of plays that I'd done in Columbus. So I had somewhat of a resume, some training in preparing specifically for an MFA program going into auditions. So I think that period in Columbus was very important in my journey, because it sort of bridged that gap between, okay, some experience in India, but also familiarity with how it works in America.
Is there a lot of theater happening in India?
Oh yeah, it's just that I wasn't a part of it.
Right.
India has an amazing, amazing theater scene, and a lot of raw talent, and especially Bangalore and Mumbai, they're known for they're theater actors. Even when you watch Bollywood movies, you can tell which ones came from a theater background, because they're so solid in what they do. So definitely, it was just that I wasn't a part of it from the beginning. It just found me later. Yeah.
When you were a child, were there any times where you were thinking, I'd love to take the stage, or is that just not something that happened in your family very often? I mean, was there any hints of it?
Oh, definitely. When I was a child, when I was in 7th grade, really, so we had these clubs you could be a part of. There was science club, there was drama club. So it was back then that, I was really into literature. I knew that. And I'd always sort of imagined the characters on stage for some reason, whenever I'd read fiction. So I joined the drama club, and I remember the instructors being very excited with the stuff that I came up with during that time.
What way? Like the subject matter, or the way that
I'd write these original things as part of what we were doing, and then we'd enact them. I remember we had to come up with a commercial, and they were so tickled by how humorous that was and how creative it was. So even back in school, when the people who are teaching you a particular subject, when you get that sort of appreciation from them, you love that subject even more. So it was kind of that. I had an inclination towards drama, and then the teachers who were sort of in charge of that club, when they would get so excited with something I'd written or performed, it sort of makes you want to do it more. And in high school, I remember I directed, it was A Midsummer Night's Dream. and with all of my classmates. And, we came up with a shorter version of the script. I did costumes. And so it was really, come to think of it, early on, there were signs that I wanted to go, it's just that I didn't know it was a career option, even, that was open to me at that point, because I hadn't come in contact with anyone who had done it. And my family had made it pretty clear what, my field
Scientist
should
and doctor,
be.
right?
Yeah, engineer or doctor.
Engineer, doctor, yeah.
Yeah.
So you get to United States. You're in your you're in your graduate studies program, and you talk a lot in The Elephant in the Room about just that, being the elephant in the room. When do you feel like you started feeling like the other?
It was initially, I just didn't know what it was. Of course, as much as there were microaggressions, there were also people who were very welcoming. And I'm not going to say all Americans were like that, but growing up in India, I knew what it was. I knew what patriarchy was. I knew what it was to be belittled as a woman. What I hadn't really, been at the receiving end of was being made to feel inferior because you're of a different race or ethnicity. That was new to me because I'd grown up there and had never stepped out of India until then. So initially, it started with my not understanding. It would just seem off when somebody would say something about the culture or about me or about the way I pronounce things, or the way I, like if I said lift instead of elevator, those little things. We have a way of speaking English, which is more derived from British because colonization, and then there's the Americans. So it took a while for me to get assimilated, but it was not just that. It was even, and I didn't sort of anticipate, receiving that in the arts, in theater. So when I was in Columbus, it was probably little things that I would just, I think it was a little odd and sort of just forget about it. But it was mostly in an academic environment where, I started becoming more aware of things, and I would just not understand why I'd be excluded sometimes, and why we were not always treated equally, and the casting that was done a certain way, and I'd always sort of end up in certain types of roles. And then until, things really got sour, where something extremely offensive and racist happened during grad school. So around that time, so that's the origin of The Elephant in the Room, is that during voice class, we were asked to write a speech of passionate concern. And it was supposed to be our speech, something that we'd written. And at that point, the conversation that I was having with friends was, it's so odd when people say this is a stereotype, and it's not necessarily how we are or how we live. And so that became this tongue-in-cheek, funny, humorous speech, which I called The Elephant in the Room because of the elephant reference, because people assume that we sort of travel on elephants on Indian streets. So that speech was so well accepted in that crowd, among my peers and the professor, and all my classmates were like, "Oh, this should be a YouTube video; it's going to go viral." But I didn't do anything with it until there was a time during grad school where it became very clear that I was singled out, and even when I reported it, nothing was done about it. It was swept under the rug. And that hit really hard because it couldn't be clearer.
Was it a student, a professor?
It was, so what happened, so part of our training is, of course, we have the classes, and then we also cast in department productions. So what happened one semester was I was the only grad student not cast. And there were 2 plays that were happening that year, and I was getting straight A's in class, so it didn't make sense. And one of the professors even said it, that this is weird because usually, even if it has happened in the past, it's because the student wasn't performing well. So, and they were both straight white male, directors, and they were both plays, in fact, that required people of color in them, but they chose not to. And it was very odd, and it was part of our training, and to be denied that. And and then there's when you don't get a cast, there's talks about being put on probation, and the fact that, listen, this has happened and it's not really my fault, and we're having talks about being put on probation going on. So it hit really hard on a different level, because the microaggressions were fine, but this was something really, really humiliating. And
you cover that beautifully in the show. I thought that that's a very specific and poignant part of the show, which was handled, but I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's just that, and it's not a revenge play, I obviously don't go into a lot of other details that happen, but enough to point out that, it's not second guessing anymore. Because with microaggressions, you're like, what was that? Was that offensive? Am I supposed to take offense? It's not clear because it's so tiny and you can't even report anything. But the second problem with this was, when I did try to talk about it or question it, there was a lot of pushback. They didn't want to deal with that. So, and the only way I could express what happened was artistically. And that was hard, because I was still a student there. And either it was very courageous or very foolish for me to write a play about it and perform it while I was still a student there. But I did perform it in front of the entire faculty, all the students, quite aware of the risk that I was taking. But my idea was, if we don't talk about the elephants in the room, they're going to continue to exist. And this could happen to another international student or a student of color who comes in later. So if you're not willing to talk about it, okay, then I'm going to express it this way, and we can have a conversation, a removed conversation in the talkback, just about the issue. So I thought it was important, despite the risks involved, for me to do it. And I did it. I don't know if it was a stupid thing to do.
Did they get it?
I think they did. I mean, of course, there's always some people who do and some people who don't. So a lot of faculty members, after I performed, wrote to me or came and spoke to me, and they said, you know what, there are times when, as an educator, I've seen things and I haven't done anything about it. I let it, sort of slide. I'm not going to let that happen in the future. For me, that was it. That's all. That means that it was a successful play. Of course, I got a lot of pushback later on. I'm not going to go into the details. I thought that things can't get worse. Like, the worst has already happened, but there was a little more things I had to deal with before I could graduate. Yeah.
One of the areas that you talk a lot about, which is a really fun part of the show, is the tarot cards. And I wonder, do those play a big part in your life? I mean, in the sense of it's a wonderful vehicle to be able to move, to be able to sort of segment the different sections of the story. But I wonder, is that something that you seem to? It was a question I had. Is that?
I'm not, like, the answer is, I'm not a person who has a deck or does tarot readings regularly. I'm agnostic. I'm not even a very religious person. So tarot, but I've always been fascinated by the cards, especially the Fool card. I've always been fascinated by this most powerful card, but it's like the Joker, right? It's the most powerful card, but it's called the Fool. But I love that, the Fool doesn't know how impossible a task is, so he just goes ahead and does it. And I connect with that a lot, because I think that's pretty much my story too, is I just didn't know that certain things were impossible to do.
I got that in the show very much, that your connection to that concept.
Yeah.
That just, there does take a certain amount of blindness, I guess. Not blindness is not a good word, but
It's
but just sort of looking the other way
yeah.
while you execute what needs to happen.
Hmm. And as I started writing the play, when the chapters and scenes were sort of unfolding, I could tell that the scene with my mom was the tower, you
Hmm.
know.
Hmm.
So it's sort of came to me, and when I needed a device when I was writing to move the play forward in its many stages of evolution, I thought this is it. It should be a tarot reading, because if I'm seeking answers and the character wants to know what do I do, then, and if a tarot, if the cards magically appear, which is what the play opens with now, is that it's an anonymous package. She doesn't know who sent it, and it's changed since the version that you saw, the Kennedy Center. The most recent version is, I guess, an anonymous package. Then she's definitely going to try and find her answers. She just needs to know, should I go on stage and perform and speak my truth or not? Right? So it became that perfect device for me to sort of explore.
Also, another section in the play is talking about your shadow self, or the shadow parts of yourself. How would you best describe, you seemed clear about that, though, knowing what that was. That's one thing that I took away from the show, is there's a clarity of purpose and a clarity of understanding, it seems, in the choices that you've made, albeit them difficult for other reasons. Do you, I'll get back to the shadow itself in just a second, but do you feel like you execute pretty confidently and you don't have much misgiving, or do you spend time, or do you just kind of push past it? Do you employ the fool?
Oh, do you mean, am I conscious and aware of the fool, being the fool in my...
Well, there's that, but I guess the decisions along the way, was there a time where you weren't confident about what you needed to do, or was it just very clear, I need to be an artist, I need to go to America, I need to do this, I need to do that? Or do you struggle? I guess they're two separate questions.
Oh,
Do you struggle a little with those things, or or do you pretty much just move ahead and it doesn't cause you much distress? And then when does the fool come into play? Is that when
no,
the
it
fool
does.
presents?
It does cause a lot of distress, because sometimes I feel that by making a choice, I'm I'm disappointing a lot of people.
Hmm.
So, and which is why I think, even as I was writing the play, I am the elephant in the room is something I discovered much later in the writing process. It's a more recent discovery that that's been added into the play, because I started connecting even with the different qualities of the elephant too, is that they're family loving, and all of these qualities I connected with that, because it was hard for me to pick this, because that means disappointing my family. It was hard for me to speak my truth out there, because I still wanted to belong to my university. I still wanted to be accepted by my cohort, by my professors. I still wanted them to claim me as a UVA student. But it was a lot that was on the line. But it's something that I owed to myself, um, as an artist, and to have that courage and speak my truth despite having so much to lose. So I think that's a constant ongoing thing, when you have to, and it's kind of like being too idealistic too sometimes. Where do you draw the line? So it's a constant battle. So even now, when I'm especially the kind of topics that I'm writing about, it's very hard for me to sometimes pick and choose what to do, because there are some people that are going to be disappointed, and you can't please everyone,
Hmm.
right? I don't know if that answers your
It
question.
does. Oh, definitely. I just am so impressed with the way in which you made these things happen for yourself back when you were in India, and put the pieces together in a very seemed like deliberate way, and had results that were really wonderful. And then to come to the United States, and to be you know to find this package waiting for you, which is a bunch, because you talk about a lot in the show, the idea of going to America and just having things be available, and you can do, and this idea that you can
Unlimited soda.
soda,
I was
right?
really excited about that.
That's it. And I guess I wonder, do you feel that you've lived in Ohio for a little while, then you were in Virginia, you have been in, is it New Hampshire recently, and then
Yeah.
coming to Philadelphia. Do you feel like living in those different parts of the country have been different in terms of your other outsider feelings, or?
Absolutely, that has a role to play too. Like, I don't think, especially now that I've written hashtag Charlottesville, I don't think I knew what kind of city I was going into. And, I thought, okay, Columbus, Ohio to Charlottesville, Virginia, it looks great. It's a university town founded by Thomas Jefferson. It's going to be great. So, of course, a lot of where I was has a role to play in it. But I don't like to associate that with the city itself, because I've also met a lot of amazing, wonderful individuals, in both places. So, yeah, which is why I don't really talk about, it is something like, if I've learned anything from writing The Elephant in the Room and writing hashtag Charlottesville, is that it's not only a problem with these specific cities. It is something that's deep rooted, and it's in the DNA of America. And that's what I'm trying to unpack in this triptych, is that so basically that's what the three plays are, right? From the perspective of an international student, an Indian woman, and then from the perspective of a city that was at the receiving end of something traumatic, which was also a result of years and years of things going a certain way. And now the third play, with The Wall, which will unpack it from an immigrant perspective, when what is the rest of the world's experience when they're trying to make it in a country like the US.
Let's talk a little bit more about the other two, hashtag Charlottesville and your latest play. Tell us how that came about.
So around the time that I was writing The Elephant, I actually wanted to work on hashtag Charlottesville first, but then, the incident that I spoke about happened, and I had to sort of write it at that point, to write Elephant in the Room at that point. And also, I think the city needed a while to heal from the trauma of what had happened. So I'm glad I started a year later. So I knew that I wanted to write a play about the events of August 11th and 12th. I just didn't feel like I was the right person to do it, because I'm not from America. I'm not from Charlottesville. I wasn't there on those 2 days. I wasn't on the streets protesting, but nobody was writing it. And I just couldn't understand why.
This was back in 2017, right?
Yes.
August of 2017.
Yeah, 2017. So around 2018, we had Moises Kaufman as a guest, at UVA, and he spoke about how he created the Laramie Project. And that's when it occurred to me that, this is it. The voice in the play, the words in the play need to belong to the people who are from here. So that's when I started interviewing people in the community who were there on the streets, on August 12th, and people who were there on near the rotunda on our grounds where the Tiki Torch rally happened. So, what followed was months and months of talking to those people. Sometimes I would have 9 interviews back to back, and I was still a grad student, right? So I was juggling with my work that I needed to do as a grad student, and then weekends or evenings, whenever I could carve out some time, I did these interviews, and then I started transcribing them. And I realized that, okay, so this needs to be a devised piece. This needs to be a cross-generational, multi-ethnic ensemble that I'm working with, because those are the people I'd interviewed. So I finally put together that ensemble, and we started devising this play. I would bring portions of the transcript. I also directed the play, so I'd work with the ensemble, and we would figure out, the scenes would eventually shape a certain way, and I'd go back and I'd write it. So, and I was also in it because, since it's a triptych, elephant in the room sort of leads to hashtag Charlottesville. That's the way I've written it. So we got the chance to do a double bill of Elephant in the Room and hashtag Charlottesville at Live Arts, which is a very popular theater venue. And they're very community driven and in fact, very close to the site where the car attack happened. So I approached them and they were like, let's do both of these plays. So that's what we were preparing for. So I was in both of them, more in Elephant in the Room and more of a narrator sort of a person and someone who ties, I'm the device that ties the scenes together in hashtag Charlottesville. But yeah, that's how the play evolved. And it was a huge responsibility because the people who were going to come to see it were the people who were there on those 2 days. And it could be, we had to be very careful that none of it is triggering, that we are not sensationalizing anything. We're speaking the truth. And the whole idea was for it to be healing for the community. And thankfully, that's what happened. And that reminds me of the power of theater, because that day at the talkback, I felt that there was some healing that happened when we could see and hear the words of the people of Charlottesville and talk about where they were at that point. And talk about what needs to change. So that confirmed that this is the kind of work that I need to do and continue doing.
How did you find the people that you ultimately ended up interviewing?
Initially, it was people who I already knew in the community, who I knew were, part of the counter protest. And what I did was, whoever I interviewed, I'd tell them, hey, if you know anybody else whose voice you think needs to be a part of this, please put me in touch. So it was a very organic way. And then eventually they would hear about it and find me. So it was close to 100 people that I interviewed before creating that play.
Do you think that were you confident, or did you feel that the people that came to see the show, were you not just preaching to the converted, but did you got a nice cross section, or it achieved what you hoped it would? Were you able to?
It was open to everyone to attend, but I didn't really get a sense of, during the talkback if there were anyone from the other side watching. But maybe that still needs to happen, which is the challenge, with the play too, is that it's happened with the Elephant in the Room, where I've had people who are not necessarily all about the topics that I talk about. I've performed in front of both audiences.
So what kind of things would they would they come after you with? Is it?
I remember in Richmond, I was performing to a particular audience, and someone was like, oh, so you made this play and they hired you back as a faculty member, and good for you. And there was another professor from another university. He's like, no, good for UVA. But or they would just, while walking out, they'd speak to the artistic director and say that, yeah, I'm not very sure if this was a play you should have had here.
Was it for that reason? Was that the objection?
No, I think it was more of me calling out.
Yeah, you were illuminating a situation.
Yeah, but I guess it may come across, it may be taken as an attack. All the tongue-in-cheek stuff that you see. I don't think it's because, I was very careful about not writing anything to antagonize, because that ultimately defeats your purpose. If as a playwright you're antagonizing your audience, the whole thing is to bring us, all of us, to a point where we can talk about it. And I remember feeling very let down that, oh, they didn't like it. But it was a good reminder for me, you're not doing this play to please the audience or entertain them. This is the kind of audience you wrote the play for. Maybe there's some pushback today, maybe 10 days later, or a month later, or a year later, or 10 years later, they remember some of the things that were brought up and understand. And it's not my responsibility to change anyone. It's my responsibility to leave them with a few questions and a different perspective. And that change may not happen overnight. And especially with hashtag Charlottesville, that is true. I really want people who may not agree with all the things that are in the play to watch it. I don't think it has happened yet, but I'm in the process of converting it to also a solo show so it can exist in both forms, both as an ensemble piece and a solo show, because it's really hard to find a cast, devise the whole thing. And so when we do have the luxury of doing that, I've written already something that can be used for that. But I also felt that the way Elephant has been sort of portable, and the message is traveling that fast, that needs to happen more in the case of #Charlottesville. So I'm writing another version of the play, which is a solo play. So I'm looking forward to presenting it in front of audience members who are not on board, and have those conversations with them, because I don't believe in cancel culture. I don't. As much as I disagree with people, I don't think the right way to deal with it is shutting them out, because that doesn't make the problem go away. It's only if we have the difficult conversations. That's the whole point of writing these plays. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that happening in the near future.
How far along are you with The Wall?
I'm currently writing that, so I don't think I expect it to be out anytime in 2020, definitely late 2021. The idea is, so early 2021 is when I expect the solo version of #Charlottesville to be out, and late 2021 is, I'm hoping that all three plays can be presented one after the other by the end of 2021.
Do you miss your life as a software engineer at all?
No, I do not. I remember absolutely hating the job.
Really? Did you expect you wouldn't like it?
I honestly thought I would love it, because, the whole idea of a corporate world, and I don't know, I just didn't think that it would be, it felt pretty much like corporate slavery, where especially when I'd be so efficient, I'd finish all my work, and then I'd think, great, so I managed my time well, so now I can do other things in the evening. And we were told that, oh, if you're done with your work, you come back and ask for more. And I said, no, I don't think so.
So do you think was it just as much was it culture? Was it the culture of where you worked, or was it the work itself, or?
It was a culture, because especially with big IT companies, it's really, corporate slavery is the best way to describe it. They'd call us resources, which I thought always was very demeaning, referring to people as resources. And I knew that there was no value for us as human beings, especially, and I've only worked for one company, and that was enough for me to sort of quit. But I also felt that, I remember this, I don't know who said it, but if you ask a fish to climb a tree, it's not going to work, right? So I felt that I was a fish. I needed to swim. I needed to do what comes naturally to me. And even though I was pretty good at what I did, but it wasn't giving me joy. And that's the main reason I quit. Otherwise, I would have just switched to a different,
Yeah. I heard recently someone say, the opposite of belonging is fitting in, or trying to fit in. And I wonder, when you were in India, or do you remember growing up in your time there, do you consciously remember trying to fit in? Or is that just such a part of so is it, or you just, that's the way the culture is?
I've been trying to fit in everywhere I go, or belong everywhere I go, and I don't think that's happening, because I don't know, it's you look at me, you don't think she listens to heavy metal, right?
That was my next question.
Right, so I've always sort of been a misfit, and the only place where I've ever found refuge or acceptance is in my art. And that sort of makes me I don't know, I may be a difficult person to be around, because you don't know what box to put me in. You don't know, so I don't know what it's like, because I've only had the experience of being inside this body. But I've always had trouble belonging and fitting in, because every time there was an expected way of behaving, I always had trouble, fitting in that mold. Um, so I remember asking my mom, "Do you think I'm your trouble child? Um, and am I a troublesome employee? Am I a troublesome student? Because I just, is it me or what is it?" But yeah, the only place where I fit perfectly is, I guess, this little world that I've created for myself, and I'm still trying to figure out how to navigate that. I always feel like a misfit wherever I go.
Do you feel like you belong more to yourself since you've been truer to yourself now? I mean, does that, did, did if that felt a little fractured, does that feel more whole because of your art and following what you needed to do?
I felt more in peace when I've been truer to myself.
Mhm.
Whenever I've tried to fight who I am, it's not ended up well for me. The only solid ground I know is looking within, and introspection, and figuring out who this person is, and spending more time going inside as opposed to try to control things that are outside of me. So as I grow older, I feel that that is the way to go, because that's what's been consistent and has given me peace and joy and happiness. I can only control what's within.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Will you try to, depending upon what happens this next year, Edinburgh was on your
Yeah.
was on your list, right?
It
For
still is.
2023, and yeah.
I mean, from what I hear, they're going full swing in their preparations for 2021. I've been in touch with my venue, and we're excited, and we're hoping that things will fall in place. But I think that if 2021 doesn't happen, then either thinking about a virtual performance for Edinburgh, or I'm even inclined to think 2022.
Mhm.
Uh, but let's see how it goes. But things are really picking up in terms of, like, in addition to Edinburgh Fringe, now I'm booking a tour. I have a couple of venues in Scotland and UK, and there's an India tour that we're planning. So everything's happening in terms of us thinking ahead and venues being interested. And yeah, so it's just that we need to figure out what to do with the virus. And then I think planning wise, everything's still on. But I'm just waiting for, theater
Yeah,
to be
for the
back,
world to
for the world to
do
be
what it
back
needs
in
to do
action.
to make that take. Well, we're so fortunate in Philadelphia that you landed here,
Oh, thank you.
to spend time with us and to be a home base for now. And it's been my pleasure to talk to you tonight. I'm very excited to see your third work come about, and I encourage everyone to, we'll put the links on Facebook and also in the chat as well. Go check out Priyanka's show, The Elephant in the Room, and keep an eye out for her. And you're still, the music site is, what's the scene is still happening, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We just completed our 10th year, and we are coming with a more global focus, and helping independent musicians discover each other globally, so that it's not just a local thing.
Mhm.
So very excited about that as well.
And you're still involved in that, or do you still have a
Absolutely.
hand in that? Right. And you're
Yeah.
in what, 9 cities?
Yeah, I mean, right now, obviously, there are no gigs happening, so we don't have regular coverage, but we're reporting new music that's coming from literally everywhere in India, and soon that focus will shift to other cities as well, global, in other countries as well.
Well, Priyanka Shetty, thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you, hopefully on Philadelphia stages when we're all back
Yeah,
and we
that
can
would be lovely.
share.
I do
And
want to say, Tina, that you're a very gifted interviewer. I haven't opened up this much in any other interview so far.
Oh,
Thank you.
well, it's a wonderful, I just want to tell you, I had so much fun doing the research for this show. And I really want to thank James Harrow over at Philadelphia Theater, Theater Philadelphia for introducing us because, and that's, that's the great thing when new people come into the community and they do all the time to Philadelphia. It's, uh, it's just, it's my pleasure to be able to give some illumination to the work that you're doing, and I can't wait to see you on stage here in Philadelphia. So,
Thank you.
best of luck with everything. Thank you so much
Thank you, Tina.
for being with us. Yeah, good
Thank you
luck.
for having me.
You're
Thanks.
welcome. My pleasure. And thanks everybody for being with us today. And I want to just give you a big heads up about what's happening on next week's show, Saturday, October the 17th. Dr. Beverly Shin will be with us. Dr. Shin is a graduate of Jefferson Medical College here. She's up in New York City at New York Presbyterian, while Cornell Medical Center at this point, and she's a psychiatry resident, and she's also had a 12-year career as a concert and a concert violinist, and she toured the world, and she made this leap from being a classical concert violinist to psychiatry, and she's doing some really interesting things with workshops for medical students on using improvisational music theory to talk about and deal with making mistakes and imposter theory and group dynamics and whatnot. So I'm really looking forward to that conversation next Saturday at 5 p.m. here on Into the Absurd. And in the meantime, we hope you'll spread the word to people in the community as we try to illuminate the creative works of people all around the country in very existentially challenging times. This is the way we stay together to tell those stories that are happening on the real live stage. So wishing you all well this week. Be safe and take care of yourselves. Thanks for being here.